Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday night, August the 11th, and I'm just happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention. It's up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open if anybody would like to sit in there. And I'm just happy to be able to continue to do these shows. It's an awesome privilege, let me tell you, to be able to stand up for children, to stand up for child rights, to stand up against child abuse. To try to save children's lives, and really to stand up for all human rights abuses, to stand up and fight against it. Like, this is a privilege. It's not only a privilege, but it's an honor, because these kids out here, they don't have a chance without us. And so, I truly believe that it's a true privilege and it's an honor to be able to do this for them on their behalf. So I thank everybody who's tuning into my shows. I have over 9,000 shows listened to, and I've done a little over 300 shows since last November, and so I look back at that and I think how many people have listened to my shows, and it's probably the same people tuning in to most of my shows, and I thank you so much for being here and listening to me night after night, day after day, talking just continually rambling on about this whole issue of child abuse. Right? Thank you so much for being here. It wouldn't mean that much if you weren't here listening and supporting me. So thank you so much for your support. So I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I say this on every show, and I just want people to know, that I'm a private citizen who pays to do my own shows, because I really feel that, if we don't talk about child abuse prevention and we don't talk about the issues surrounding child abuse and human rights abuses, nothing's going to change. It's really up to us. We're going to have to start talking about it. We're going to have to start finding out ways that are going to take a look at what's not working, and then don't do that, and look at what is working and then do that, right? Support the things that are working, and move on and leave the stuff that's not working behind, and because it's obvious that the system is not working. More and more children are losing their lives at the hands of parents and caregivers who just cannot cope. So many times, so many people like to make it out that it's not the parents who are killing these children, but it is. And if it's not the parent, it's a boyfriend or girlfriend of the parent. And, you just take a look at what's going on in the headlines, and you can see the majority of it is a family member. And if these children aren't killed by them, they will be, severely injured. And if not physically, then emotionally scarred for the rest of their lives. And I tell you, we have to do something. We cannot allow this to continue as a society. We cannot allow this to happen any longer. And so, that's why I continually do this day in and day out, not just me, but all the advocates out here. I'm speaking on behalf of every single advocate who fights against child abuse, whether it be sexual abuse, physical, psychological, you neglect, you name it. We're not going away, and we're not going to shut up. We got to keep talking, and the more voices we can get to add to this, the better, because we need everyone's voice, right? This is so important. We all need to be a part of this change, right? And so that's why I'm just so happy to be able to do these shows. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, and that way, they can help you decide if you really should be listening to it. There's a lot of adult content on my shows, as much as it is about, stopping child abuse and for children. The material is, a lot of it is scary, because the topics of abuse are scary. And so, mainstream society is not talking very much about abuse. The only thing we see are the headlines in the paper, coming out on the news, or the radio, talking about the different headlines every day, child abuse issues and stories coming out. But we don't hear a whole lot about what goes on behind, the whole issues surrounding child abuse and prevention. And so that's why I just think everyone, under the age of 18 should have permission to listen to my show, and also, just so that someone who can listen to the show with you to help you make a decision whether you should be listening to it or help you with questions. So we're going to continue talking tonight about a PDF download that I actually found a while back, and we've been talking about it now for a couple weeks. It's the Child Abuse and Neglect User Manual Series from childwelfare.gov. That's the Child Welfare Information Gateway, www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /foundation/foundation.pdf. And it's a coordinated response to child abuse and neglect, the Foundation for Practice. That's the name of this PDF. It's 114 pages long, and we're on about page 40, 45 or something, and I don't think we'll cover the whole thing, but I just wanted to touch on some of it, because some of it is really well written, and it's simple to understand. It's some good information. It was put out in 2003, And it was put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau, and Office on Child Abuse and Neglect. And we've covered quite a bit of it now, but it's a great resource for people who want to know more about, what is child abuse? What are the consequences of child abuse? What can be done to prevent child abuse? It's a great PDF, 114 pages long, and I would highly recommend it for everybody to go and check it out. It's good stuff. We're going to read through some more of it here. I'm going to try to pick up where we left off here on Monday night, and you can go back and listen to the archive if you like. And all of last week in the evenings we were covering this. And what is the scope of the problem? We took a look at that. We looked at, just moving on to the next chapter, what factors contribute to child abuse and neglect, chapter 5. We did cover that. And I want to move on here. Yeah, so it's a great bunch of information. They have some information. This is interesting, the child abuse and father absence connection, and they go in to talk a lot about that. When there's no father in the home, the child abuse and the father absence connection. That's something that not a whole lot of people are talking about, but it is a huge issue when there's no father in the home, and just how hard it is on the family and on the children. And mothers abuse too, right? That's just the whole issue. A lot of times people like to think that it's just fathers or husbands, men, that abuse, but actually a lot, anyone can be an abuser, whether it's a man or a woman, or an old person, a young person, children, young children can abuse. Anybody can be an abuser, right? So that's the whole thing. Let's see, what else do they go on to talk about here? Factors that contribute to child abuse. I think that's where we're going to pick up here. I don't think we covered this part. And this is right around page 40. Let's see. Contributing factors. Parent disabilities, child, let's see, age. I'm just trying to find where we left off. Sorry about that. No, I think we did go through that. And what are the consequences of child abuse and neglect? I think this is where we left off. That's right. So there's health and physical effects, intellectual and cognitive development, emotional, psychological, and behavioral consequences. Now, these are in all overlapping areas. These are where the issues lie. The consequences will occur, right? And we were reading that a lot of the studies that are done, depending on the type of study that was done, the information just wasn't that clear. And what I was saying on Monday night was, all you have to do is talk to somebody who's been abused, and you can find out just exactly what the consequences are. I've known so many people in my lifetime who were abused, including my own mother, my dad, and my whole family, and a lot of my friends growing up, and even some people that I met as an adult. And the statistics that we came up with, and what I could see, it's all pretty much standard across the board. But they always say that the studies are based on the information that they collected at the time, and they're not always the best. They could be better, right? There's always new studies coming out and whatnot. And I want to take a look at. We did look at the shaken baby syndrome, and I did talk about that Monday night. And I was pretty upset about that, because that just bothers me that, I was just saying, if anybody has not gone and checked out a shaken baby syndrome website, any website that covers SBS or shaken baby syndrome material, please do, because you will want to get involved and stop child abuse once you see that. The effects from that, the children just, the little toddlers, little babies being shaken, their brains are bouncing around in their heads, and they're quite often crippled for the rest of their lives if they survive at all. A lot of them might end up, with breathing tubes and feeding tubes, and they're just in a wheelchair and brain damaged, no motor functions, no motor skills whatsoever. And, I was talking a lot about that, and on my show in the morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, I'd go into quite a lot of detail about the physical abuse that I suffered from my mother mainly, but also from my dad. And, I was slammed into walls. I was thrown across the room into walls, shoved into walls, and picked up and thrown across the room into walls numerous times, and the damage done to my neck and my back. It's a miracle that my neck wasn't broken or my back wasn't broken, and just to try to describe that to somebody, who's never seen it or experienced it or witnessed it, you know, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. 3 years ago I got off the couch. I said, why am I sitting on the couch when I know firsthand what these children are going through? And I know that without our voices, they don't have a chance. Without everybody standing up, all of us in the communities, in this world, if we don't stand up for these children, this is going to continue on, and this is why we have to do this. And lots of people fight against child abuse that were not abused, and I thank them so much for doing that. And there's a lot of people out there who are fighting to stop child abuse who have been abused, because we know what it's like, and we want to stop it so that no child will ever have to suffer from that again. Right? So important. So they go on to talk about cognitive development and academic achievement. And this is a real problem, when children are abused. Current research differs on findings related to the consequences of maltreatment on cognitive development, verbal abilities, and problem-solving skills. Some studies find evidence of lowered intellectual and cognitive functioning in abused children as compared to children who had not been abused, and other studies find no differences. So research has consistently found that maltreatment increases the risk of lower academic achievement and problematic school performance. Abused and neglected children in these studies received lower grades and test scores than did non-maltreated children. And I mean, that's just, par for the course. A child who's being mistreated and abused at home is quite often not going to be able to focus and cope with the material being thrown at them all day in class after they haven't had any sleep, and they're trying to deal with either the physical, emotional, psychological damage that was done to them the day before, the night before, the week before, and especially when it's ongoing. Children cannot quite often concentrate. Then they might not be able to focus on what the tasks that they need to do during the day. I mean, I had a lot of problems in school because of the abuse that I was suffering at home, especially elementary school, and that's when most of the abuse was taking place. And even into junior high. I had problems in junior high as well. Now in high school, I started, even though I was using drugs, I was quite often high. I was actually quite able to do my work and do my studies by the time I got to high school. But my elementary school and junior high, I was just quite messed up. Had a lot of anxiety problems and just so many issues going on, right, because of the abuse and the domestic violence in our home. So yeah, it was just absolutely horrible. And so, yeah, it's just not good. And so it's just so important that people realize that, yeah, this affects children in every area of their life. And, they just need help, right? We have to do what we can. I have people messaging me. I'm trying to actually see what's going on. It's so important that we get kids help, right? And teachers, they need to be paying a bit more attention to what's going on with the children in their classes, in their classrooms. There's signs and symptoms of abuse. And if you know the signs and symptoms of abuse and you suspect a child is being abused, you have to do the right thing and make the phone call. It is actually the law, you know what I mean? It's against the law to not report abuse. And if you suspect abuse and you don't report it, it's against the law. We need to take a different look at this, you know what I mean? We shouldn't just be reporting it because it's the law. We should be reporting it because if this is a poor child who's being mistreated and abused, and they need help. And if their parents aren't going to get them help, and no one in the family is going to get them help, who's going to get them help? If it's not the teachers or somebody who sees this child on a daily basis and sees the bruises, sees the welts, sees the dirty clothes, sees the same clothes being worn all the time, and they're filthy. They're not functioning well in class, not able to handle any kind of assignments that are coming up, and stressed out kids. There's something going on in the home, and just to turn a blind eye because you don't want to get involved, that makes me sick to my stomach, and it makes me angry that people let me go through their classrooms without questioning what was going on. I mean, I had split lips and bruises on my face, and it was just ridiculous. I mean, I'd be crying in class all day, and I'd be called a crybaby. Nobody would ask me about if I was having, they wouldn't even take me aside. They shouldn't have even asked. What they should have done is called CPS. You know what I mean? Make the phone call, man. You know what I mean? Instead of just letting a child sit there and suffer and call them crybabies because they're crying in class all day. Well, I couldn't handle anything because of the abuse that I suffered in my home. I was I was not even hardly 5 years old when I started school. And first grade, I went right from the home to first grade, and I was so unable to handle being in any kind of situation, period. Whether I was at home, school, didn't matter. I was just crying all the time. And it was because it was a horrible, traumatic way to grow up, right? So teachers, I really, teachers need to pay more attention. I'm sorry, but they do. And I don't care what kind of excuse they might want to bring up, right? We need to stop making excuses for this stuff. We all need to take accountability and start reporting this stuff. We see a child, we think, oh, that child might be being abused. I know the signs and symptoms of all the different kinds of abuse, and I suspect that child's being abused. Make the phone call, right? You have to for these children, right? And now I want to really touch on this. Emotional, psychological, and behavioral development. They wrote here, this is page 44 of this PDF. All types of maltreatment, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and psychological or emotional maltreatment can affect a child's emotional and psychological well-being and lead to behavioral problems. And these consequences may appear immediately after the maltreatment or years later. I think we had started to touch on this stuff on Monday night. Emotional and psychological consequences. While there is no single set of behaviors that is characteristic of all children who have been abused and neglected, the presence of emotional and psychological problems among many maltreated children is well documented. And clinicians and researchers report behaviors that range from passive and withdrawn to active and aggressive. Physically and sexually abused children often exhibit both internalizing and externalizing problems. And emotional and psychological or psychosocial problems identified among individuals who were maltreated as children include, and they list a bunch of stuff here, low self-esteem, depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, attachment difficulties, eating disorders, poor peer relations, and self-injurious injurious behavior, suicide attempts. This is exactly what the problem is. And they say even though a child being abused might not suffer from all of those, they very well might suffer from some of them. Even one or two of them is enough to put that child back. A lot of people suffer from self-esteem and depression and whatnot, and it's not abuse related. Now this we know. But you think about growing up in a home where you're just being berated and verbally abused and physically abused and sexually abused. Your self-esteem is not going to be good. Depression and anxiety, listening to parents fight all the time, domestic violence situations, a lot of violence in the home between the siblings. Violence in the neighborhood will quite often cause this type of stuff, right? If the children are living in an area where there's a lot of crime and a lot of violence and the parents aren't getting along and they're fighting, and it can bring on a lot of anxiety problems, a lot of depression, and I had all of that as a child, right? And even, I probably still do suffer from some of that. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, that's another one, attachment difficulties, eating disorders, poor peer relations, suicide attempts, and self-injurious behavior like cutting and self-injuring, self-sabotaging, right? This is really what I focus on for my morning shows, one child abuse survivor to another, because coming from, a survivor of child abuse, right, there's so many, there's so many of us that have been through, so much in our lifetimes, as suffered as children, and then we go on to suffer these horrible things as horrible symptoms as adults, and it's so incredibly sad. Now, I'm so happy to still be here. I'm incredibly happy to be able to say that today, at the age of 41, or at the age of 45, I was 41 when I began my healing journey, I'm in such a much better place now. I don't come home to this depression and to this, feeling of, that my life was just not worth living because I was just so much pain inside, and physical pain. I mean, I suffer from chronic pain, and I've been suffering from chronic pain since I was a kid, right? So I've had pain in my body for my whole life. And then when I had a couple of car accidents, it really drove that home. And so now I'm just in pain most of the time, physical pain. But that's not the stuff that was getting to me. I can handle the physical pain. Is that pain in my heart, from being abused and mistreated and watching my family just be destroyed right in front of my eyes, year after year after year. And that's what happens to these children, right? So, just so that people know and are aware how serious this is, right? And this is why I'm doing this, right? I'm just as honest as I could possibly be on these shows, because I want people to, not a whole lot of survivors are in a comfortable enough place. Well, there are some, lots and lots of them I've met just recently in the last year or so that are out there. They're telling their stories. They've written their books. They're out there. They are an open book, right? They are telling it like it is. And thank God. I just want it to be one more. You know what I mean? So I'm not the only one who's doing this. I'm not by any means the first. You know what I'm saying? I just came up behind them and I thought, hey, look what they're doing. I want to do that because I can try to help people to see that life is worth living and it's worth fighting for, and we deserve to have a good life. And so this is the kind of stuff we don't want to see any more children having to do, right? No child should have to grow up being abused and then have to spend the rest of their adult life trying to heal from it to figure out that life is good and that they do deserve to be here. I mean, this is ridiculous. And who's putting this on these kids is these parents, parents and caregivers. Whether it's an aunt or an uncle who's looking after the child or a grandparent or somebody in the family, close relative, they have no business treating these children like this. So if you suspect abuse, you have to do the right thing and report it, right? We all do. And so it's so important that we do know this and we get these children some help, right? I'll just keep reading here. Maltreated children who developed insecure attachments to caregivers may become more mistrustful of others and less ready to learn from adults. And they also may experience difficulties in understanding the emotions of others, regulating their own emotions, and informing and maintaining relationships with peers. And so that's just the thing, right? I mean, it's serious. It's very, very serious. And later on in life, and then quite often that whole cycle of abuse is passed on because they can't regulate their own emotions. This is what happened to my mom. She was abused as a child, could not regulate her own emotions, did not understand other people, couldn't figure out herself, and so just passed this whole cycle on to her children. And my dad did the same thing, although he's borderline schizophrenic and he's got who knows what other kind of problems, psychological and emotional problems. But the thing is they were two people that needed help. And they got together and they married each other for the wrong reasons, right? Very much codependent, trying to find that person in their life to fix all this. And they both married each other, and they were both a mess. Couldn't help each other, couldn't help themselves, and they ended up passing the cycle on to their children. So horrible. And this is what's happening right today. We see this happening today. We don't want this. We have to. Education is the key, and I tell you what, that's exactly what it is. We need to start. There needs to be more work done in the schools because children are not going to learn this from home unless their parents are talking about it. Let me tell you, and not very many parents are sitting down saying, "What can we do to make our family better? What can we do to solve these problems? What can we do to make our lives better? To problem solve, to cope, to learn how to handle these issues that come up. When there's a job loss or somebody's a substance user in the family, how are we going to get them some help? Sitting down, learning how to problem solve, learning how to cope, learning to make the phone calls to get the help. Not very many families are doing that. Let me tell you, it's just easier to drown your sorrows in a bottle of alcohol and then beat on your children and your wife. Or if you're an abusive wife, you might decide that you're going to have a few drinks and then batter your children and beat on your husband. This I've seen firsthand both ways. It's absolutely horrible what people are doing to their families. It's got to stop. We as a society need to get the education out there. People need to start talking. I plan on doing this for the rest of my life. This is what I will do. I'm going to try to, right now I do go into schools when I can to volunteer with an organization up here in Canada, the CHF, formerly known as the Canadian Hunger Foundation, and they're a group that goes into the rural areas, the rural poor, to help them around the world, the most neediest of people, to get water systems and food supplies going and whatnot to help these people. So I go into schools, I talk about the issues surrounding the rural poor and the Canadian Hunger Foundation, the CHF, formerly known as Canadian Hunger Foundation. So I do that already with them, a global educator volunteer. But the thing is with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, what I'd like to do is become really one of the lead people that actually sets up and goes out and does these tours, going through schools, going and talking to students, assemblies, and just getting the education out there that these children should know that if they are being abused, they can get help. There's phone numbers they can call anonymously, even if they don't want to give their name, just so that they know there's help out there. And also for parents, I want to start getting involved with parents and groups of parents who are having a hard time, and get the information out to them that there's ways to cope. We don't have to lash out and kill our children. We don't have to beat on our children. We don't have to insult or verbally abuse our children. We can learn to love ourselves and our families, and this is what it's going to take. You know what I mean? Because people are going to have to start taking being responsible and taking accountability for the way they treat their family members. You know, and I wish that my parents would have done that. Our family would have been completely different. And I wish that my parents' parents had done that, because then my parents wouldn't have suffered that, and then we wouldn't have suffered that. This whole cycle of abuse, it needs to stop, right? So the next portion of this article is violence, substance abuse, and other problem behaviors. Individuals victimized by child maltreatment are more likely than people who are not maltreated to engage in juvenile delinquency, adult criminality, and violent behavior. And a study sponsored by the National Institute of Justice followed cases from childhood through adulthood and compared arrest records of a group of substantiated cases of maltreatment with a comparison group composed of individuals who were not officially recorded as maltreated. And while most members of both groups had no juvenile or adult criminal records, being abused or neglected as a child increased the likelihood of arrest as a juvenile by 53% and as a young adult by 38%. And physically abused children were the most likely of maltreated children to be arrested later for violent crime, followed closely by neglected children. And I can tell you firsthand all about this. A lot of my brothers, first of all, were quite often in trouble with the law at a young age. They were doing drugs. They were stealing from people's homes, breaking and entering. They were doing all kinds of criminal behavior and activity, hanging out on the streets, getting into trouble. One of my brothers was murdered at the age of 19. Who knows by who? You know, there was people with their own suspicions, but it was never proved who did it. So it was just ruled, unknown, right? Nobody. The FBI closed it, cold case, right? So, so sad, right? This happens. Now, I know, my own group of kids that I hung around with, many of them were abused. Actually, almost all of them were either neglected or abused, and we were always up to no good. A lot of juvenile issues, juvenile delinquency. I just evaded the law and evaded getting in trouble so that I would not be abused at home, because I knew that if I had gotten in trouble with the law and I was sent home to deal with it with my parents, then I was already being abused anyway for being a good kid. So I thought, well, if I get caught doing something like this, they'll kill me for sure. And so I was just very good at not getting caught. But a lot of my friends would get in trouble, get busted, and I had a lot of friends doing a lot of crazy things, and I always tried to stay on the right side of the law, pretty much, you know what I mean, because I really did not want to ruin my life any more than it already was. But I knew so many kids who were up to no good and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and most of them were abused. And I can just go in to tell you all their stories, but that's another day, that's another time. I just can't mention names, but the thing is I could tell you about their lives, and then you would begin to see why kids do what they do and why they're out there on the streets doing what they do. It's absolutely horrible. Most of the kids that I knew that grew up in good, loving homes were not out doing that kind of stuff. They were all preparing for their college exams and taking their ACTs and doing their pre-work for college and university, because they had already picked out what they were going to be doing. And the rest of us who were abused and neglected were all on the street using drugs and getting in trouble, right? So that's the whole issue. I saw it firsthand, and I know myself exactly what this is all about. So it's these findings, they are right. So everybody, I hope you have a great night. We have about a minute left. Be sure and check out our new website for Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. It sort of coincides with Dreamcatchers Talk Radio on Blog Talk Radio, and it's www.dreamcatcherstalkradio.web.com. And on there you can see all the guests that are going to be scheduled, the guest links to their websites and pictures and whatnot, events and different things, news stuff, blogs and news and stuff like that about Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. And that's on Blog Talk Radio every night, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm a host on there as well, just in case people didn't know that. There's Janelle Matula, South Central Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Elizabeth Brawley, she's the Southern Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Donna Shear is the President of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And we all do shows throughout the week, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. And so I hope you can tune into one of our shows and catch that. And we also have Janelle Matula has her own show here on Blog Talk Radio coming up at 12 midnight Central Standard Time. And that's at www.blogtalkradio.com/Janelle, Janell -Matula, or Dreamcatchers Dreamcatchers, DREAMCATHERS. So have a great night, everybody. Take care of yourselves. I'll be back on tomorrow, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. I have a special guest, an awesome, possibly a regular guest coming on my show, and that will be Ray Luskin, and she's going to talk to us about a lot of healing and healing therapy and different types of things to do with survivor issues and whatnot, and healing and wholeness. And she's going to be on my show August the 16th at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, which would be 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I hope you will be there. It's going to be an hour-long show, Ray Luskin, and you don't want to miss this, because I know I'm going to get a lot of healing from this. This lady, she is awesome, and she's got some wonderful things to tell us. And I hope that you will be here if you've been through any kind of domestic violence situation or a survivor of child abuse. This is going to be the show for you to listen to, because Ray Luskin has some awesome information for all of us. And I know it's going to be very healing for myself, so I know it will be very healing for the listeners, so I hope you can tune into that. If you need something, get a hold of me here on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook, wherever. I'll be around, especially tomorrow night. If you need something, just leave me a message for sure, and I'll try to get back to you right away. Take care, everybody, and just keep reaching out. Make sure that you don't suffer in silence. And if you need any more information, get a hold of me about child abuse prevention and whatnot. Check out Dreamcatchers for Abused Children website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com, and you can get all the information there regarding child abuse prevention, how to report it, resources for parents who are having a hard time and don't want to abuse their children. That's the most important thing. If you're a parent and you're having a hard time, there's information out there for you. You can get help. You don't have to hurt your children, and this is the whole thing. I wish people would realize that before they kill their children tonight. You know what I mean? I just wish that for all these children out here tonight who are going to die at the hands of their parents or caregivers just because they can't cope with them crying or, getting out of bed, getting a drink of water, whatnot, right? These children will be killed for whatever reason, for no reason. There's absolutely no reason for it. So make sure you do what you can to stop child abuse. Get involved. Be a voice. Get active. Get involved within your own community. And then support groups who are doing some great work. And I would hope that you would support Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. But whoever you support, make sure you support somebody who's doing some real proactive work to stop child abuse. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.